Shrinkage. Yeah, that's a problem. What's up, Trekkies? Welcome back to the channel. This is my review of the Terratin incident, the first season episode of Star Trek, the animated series. In this episode, the Enterprise crew begin to shrink when they encounter a strange volatile planet. With the crew rapidly unable to perform basic functions like pushing buttons, Kirk beams to the planet's surface where he discovers a miniature city that could be responsible for their tiny predicament. I like the Terratin incident. I think it's a fun, silly episode. It's got plenty of problems, but we'll get into that. I think it's a good episode that leans into some classic sci-fi concepts and is a good example of Star Trek taking advantage of the animated format. Let's start off with the good stuff. Let's start off with the stuff that I liked, and the first thing I've got here is the shrinking concept. Miniature adventures, it's an old classic sci-fi trope. We've seen it in things like Fantastic Voyage and later films like Inner Space, and even Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I don't know why we get such a kick out of seeing humans in tiny form. I guess it gives us a different perspective on things, right? It's a fun way to explore things that we already know. If we were shrunk down to a completely different perspective, a miniaturized perspective, we would inevitably see the world in a different way. Now, Star Trek's no stranger to doing miniaturized episodes. What we got here would essentially lay the foundation for a few other episodes. One Little Ship, the awesome Deep Space Nine episode where Dax and O'Brien are miniaturized in a runabout and they have to fly through the Defiant. I love that episode. I can't wait to review that one. I like the setup of this episode. I like the setting of the planet, the crystalline lava planet. I think that's a really unique planet design that you never really see in Star Trek, really, because it's kind of hard to do that kind of stuff in live action, I guess. And that's another example of the animated series and just what it could do. I really liked this idea of this kind of transparent or translucent planet with fire coursing underneath the surface, kind of almost like blood through veins. I know the episode doesn't really give us that visual, but it at least gave me the base to start imagining what a planet like that would be in real life. And I guess that's one of the cool things about Star Trek, right? It gets us thinking about what things could be. And I think the animated series is a really underrated show in that regard. It gives us those small little seeds, those little nuggets that get us dreaming about space and strange new worlds. This episode is a really good example of that. I like the humor that's kind of sprinkled throughout this episode. The crew having to wear stilts to to pilot the ship, and Spock standing on buttons and things like that. I also like the way this episode resolved things through the use of technology, particularly through the use of transporters, which Kirk learns is able to restore his form from miniature to normal sized, using pre-existing patterns as a template of sorts. We'd see this in future Star Trek, particularly Unnatural Selection, and I think there are a few others as well where the solution by the end of the episode is, just fuck it, just throw them in the transporter, they'll come out fine in the end. This was kind of the starting point for that. Thanks, Terratin incident. Now onto some aspects that I'm a little bit mixed on. It's a good, fun concept, but I do feel like it's mostly unexplored. The crew shrink down to this point where things like laboratory mice are a danger. What if they'd shrunk down to the point where they were practically microscopic and they were having to fight things like microorganisms on the ship, things like bacteria? We'd have these shots of like Scotty and a bunch of engineers like barricading themselves against bed lice or something. I don't know. I think that would be really cool. That's something that I'd love to see in a future episode of Star Trek. And given the fact that Strange New Worlds loves giving us silly novelty episodes, like this is ripe material for them to use in a future episode. Now onto the bad, the stuff that I didn't really like, and this episode is unfortunately a victim of some pretty massive plot holes. The whole episode hinges on the contact being made with the Terratins, these colonists that have been miniaturized as a result of being on this planet. Why didn't they just contact the ship before to let them know they were there? They obviously had the ability, the means to do that, so why didn't they do that? That seems to be something you would probably do if you wanted to be rescued from this planet that's about to explode. Obviously the answer to this is because if they did that we wouldn't have an episode, dude. But still, I think it's pretty valid criticism. And I guess there's a consistency issue as well, in that Kirk gets beamed to the planet's surface and he's restored to normal size. Later on, the Enterprise beams up the Terratin city. Why aren't the Terratins restored to their normal size? I guess we could headcanon it and say that they've been on the planet's surface for so long that, I don't know, the size has become irreversible, maybe, but that's not explained in the episode. I'm just headcanoning that, and that for me is a consistency issue that the episode never really addresses. Make it make sense in my head. The episode, like pretty much every episode of the animated series, is just beset with animation issues, that stock music that will never go away out of my head, awkward dialogue, and some wooden delivery from some actors that literally just came into the studio and probably just read a few lines and chucked those over their shoulder and just left. One final issue, and I guess this probably just ties into not taking full advantage of the concept that they had with the planet being in this kind of volatile condition. There never seemed to be this rush, this impetus to solve the drama, solve the problem within a certain set amount of time. So there just didn't really seem to be enough urgency in resolving this story. And yeah, that's a real shame too. All in all, the Terratin incident is a fun and ambitious episode of the animated series, but it is constrained by that ambition. Perhaps a little bit too ambitious by the resource and the ability that the show had at the time, but I still enjoy watching it nonetheless. It's a good example of what the animated series brought to the Star Trek universe. For anyone that doesn't watch the animated series or doesn't watch animated Star Trek because they don't consider it canon, stop that. Stop that. Go watch this episode. It's a lot of fun. Give the animated stuff a try. I think that this ability for animated stuff to really explore things that live action can't do or couldn't do. I mean, modern Star Trek is able to do pretty much anything now, but back in the day, this was all stuff that was completely beyond the scope and the skill of what the animated series could do. I like the animated show. I consider it canon. I really enjoy it. I enjoyed reviewing this episode, and I will be reviewing all of them at some point. But what did you think of this episode? Let me know in the comment section below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more Star Trek reviews and content like this coming soon. Next on my head is some more videos that you might find fun if you want to jump into the vortex that is TrekLad. Until next time, I'm the TrekLad. Live long and prosper.